going with the same stuff. You really think you're different, man? You must be kidding. Think you're gonna hit it, but you just don't get it. It's impossible. It's not probable.
Hey, and welcome to Xaviers podcast for gifted listeners. I'm Shockey, and I'm here to talk about my favorite topic, X-Men. First, a little bit about me. I started watching X-Men, the animated series, when I was in kindergarten. I used to play Barbies with my grandma and pretend that they were X-Men. I spent my entire 4th and 5th grade year pretending to be Jean Grey with my best friend who pretended to be Rogue. I'm now 21 years old, a pre-med college student with multiple disabilities, and a never-ending love for X-Men. As someone who is disabled and chronically ill at a young age, I was about 9 when I first was hospitalized for several months. I learned a lot about what it's like to be different and to not feel in control of your life, much like the mutants in the world of X-Men. Ironically, later in life, I would get diagnosed with a genetic mutation of my own, though less superpowers and more of my body just falling apart. X-Men has always been a political comic based on the lives of minorities. It's no secret that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby wrote X-Men as a metaphor for racism. It's one of the reasons I find it such an important comic series, as it allows people to see themselves as superheroes facing some of the same hatred and bigotry that the X-Men and mutants face daily. The argument between whether we should be tolerant or radical to move forward and change the world is one that has been talked over for decades. Even today, we see that some people want radical change, while others are more lenient and reserved in their methods of inciting change. Over the course of this podcast, I'm going to be discussing not only the comics, but also the movies, the cartoons, and the new TV show that was just recently canceled, The Gifted. It will be part review, part reaction, and a lot of talking about the comparisons we see in real life and the social political aspects that should be discussed more frequently in regards to comics and other geek media. When it comes down to talking about the cartoons and comics, I'll likely do some comparisons of storylines and character development, but I won't be comparing the comics to movies. In my personal opinion, the movies are an alternate universe where the director is like a fan fiction writer. Some of it's good, and some of it can sound like a 13-year-old on fan fiction wrote it without reading more than one comic book. But I digress. In the following episode, I'm going to discuss one of my current favorite series that just recently came to an end, X-Men Red. X-Men Red, which recently came to a very satisfying conclusion. One of my favorite quotes from it is, "I think it's fair to say every time Howard decides to discuss dealing with a minority without involving the minority in the conversation, it ends badly." This is a reference directly to the Utopia situation that occurred between Avengers vs. X-Men, but it's also a very good comparison to our day-to-day lives. X-Men Red is by far one of the better X-Men comic lines that I've read recently, not just because it contains Jean Grey, my favorite, but because of its social political commentary. Quotes such as, "Mutants shouldn't need to be heroes for acceptance." And not only that, but X-Men has always been a comic comparison for the struggles. X-Men Red reminds us of that, from the dialogue to things in the background, hate groups carrying tiki torches, gun violence, to even the following news headlines such as, "Insurance companies unwilling to cover mutants," "Bill proposing enhanced screening of mutants entering the country," calls for children and mutants to be released and reunited with parents. Not only are these issues that we see in the day-to-day media, but now we are seeing it in a comic format that will reach more people and maybe bring forth issues that others haven't looked at before. Another one of my favorite moments is Jean's confrontation to the manifestation of hate, Cassandra Nova, shows what X-Men has always been and should always be about. The quote says, "See, people like you, with so much fear and hate in their heads, you are always so quick to confuse empathy with weakness. Empathy isn't weakness. It just means we have something bigger than ourselves to fight for, and that makes us dangerous. You have made me dangerous. You're afraid of what we represent. You're afraid of our compassion, and you're afraid of what it says about you, that you have none. You're afraid that you're wrong, that you're less, and that you're lacking. I'm not afraid to die for others. In fact, I'd argue I've gotten pretty good at it. I've done it a few times now. I'm not afraid to die for what I believe in. Are you?" That entire monologue is a very powerful statement. it shows that not only has Jean Grey been through a lot, but she's standing for what the X-Men have always stood for, which is equality for mutants, and not just the X-Men, but mutants all over. So, join me next time, and welcome to the X-Men. Hope you survive the experience.